All right. Hello and welcome everyone and happy Tuesday. My name is Michelle Gilbert. I am the team manager for student organizations. For anyone that's new here, Lunch and Learns were created a few years ago to help provide informative information for all of our chapter leaders and members. And today I'm excited we have Bridget here with us, who this is hosted by Sergo, one of our honor societies. And so just as a quick reminder, these Lunch and Learns are recorded, and we will make sure that link gets posted into the President's Roundtable Facebook group, and then we can send it out to anyone that may not have been able to join today or would like to listen to the recording again. We can absolutely send that to you. So Bridget, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
All right. Well, hello and welcome for joining me on maybe your lunch hour or just a break in your day. I appreciate it. And thank you for hosting me. My name is Bridget Kimsey. I'm of the Lenape Nation. You can see our seal of the Delaware tribe, the Lenape. I'm part of the Tukwistok clan, or the Wolf clan. We also have the Turkey clan and the Turtle clan as well. So this is a presentation and talk about a Native Nations perspective on the environment. And this is from a Lenape point of view, although I have been influenced by other Native elders throughout my history. And I'll go ahead and start here. This talk will be giving some basic tenets of what it means to be part of the environment from a Lenape perspective, the human presence with the earth, species of earth, the atmosphere, space, and the multi-layers of reality that create the human environment. And so what I hope to present is an awareness of how this works for one Indigenous tribe that's been here for about 10,000 years on the earth, on the eastern seaboard. But there are Indigenous cultures and nations throughout the world, and they have a lot of valuable information. Some of it is being utilized, some of it is lost, but it does come from a different structural and system than we might see in the Western dominant culture. My hope, and I'll read a little bit from my notes, that there are differing ways to view the human experience within their environment. So with learning what works from other cultures, global Indigenous cultures that have lasted for thousands of years, can this help inform differing ways humans today perceive and work within their environment? I think we have a lot more we can utilize from our collective history as a human species and not feel quite so adrift as sometimes I hear people talking regarding climate change and right way to structure society. There we go. So this is a little bit about me. I won't go too much into it. You're always welcome to be in touch. My background is in healthcare. I'm a healer, an author, and a Master of Science degree candidate here at APU in the field of space studies and astronomy. So I've been in the healing arts and sciences for about 28 years, and I have my roots and beginnings in learning working with my Native elders. From their guidance, I went on to hold and study various credentials in integrative health, and I work closely, mostly in ambulatory settings, medical and scientific communities on different cases and projects. I specifically was in oncology medicine for 15 years, and that really led me wanting to go deeper into physics, bringing up this bridge between Indigenous research methods and ways of knowing in collaboration with Western dominant science, and how if you raise them up both to mathematical equations, both parties can actually learn quite a bit from each other, and to encourage the understanding of the power and the integrity that is inside of Indigenous ways that Western dominant scientific methods and disciplines can actually learn quite a bit from. All right, so into it. So this is the cover. This is the cover of Professor Kraft's work, or one of his books, The Indians of Lenapehoking. Lenapehoking are the traditional ancestral lands of Lenape. Professor Kraft was a university professor, an archaeologist, an anthropologist at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. He dedicated his life, starting as a boyhood, for about 70 years, studying the Lenape Indians in New Jersey and their surrounding areas. His son also is an archaeologist, John Kraft. And they've contributed a great amount of literature and research inside of the study of Lenape Indians, both from digs, storytelling, as well as from looking and reading Dutch colonial manuscripts. So it's a really nice way, a layering way of getting some real accuracy of what it was like 10,000 years to present day with the Lenape Indians. We can see here in this picture, Lenape Hoken. This land included all of present-day New Jersey, southeastern New York State, Staten Island, the western part of Long Island, a small part of western Connecticut, eastern Pennsylvania, and parts of the state of Delaware. And so if you think of the word Manhattan, think of New York City, Manhattan is a Lenape word that means island. All right, so if we go back 10,000 years, or 10,000 years BC, so I guess that's really 12,000 years ago. You know, what I want to kind of bring in is that technology, at least for Lenape and most indigenous cultures, has always been part of our community and culture, bringing in new ideas, trying out different things. There is a respect for both the individual learning and then bringing that back to the community, and then the community deciding as a group if this is something they want to go forward with, and that will help and protect them 7 generations ahead. So I'm just some pictures from Dr. Kraft's work. You know, I've gotten us out of the nomadic period of now 1000 BC to AD 900. So you can kind of see some of what's going on, but I will give a little bit of a background here as we move along. So here, I'll go to the next page. So there's a lot of observing and listening to nature, other species of earth, tribal elders, ways of life were created, structures and systems put in place that made sense at the time for the community, for the land, how the water was doing, how the hunt was going, just general sense. And then when new ideas came along, such as farming, it was really done in a very methodical, ritualistic way to see, is this healthy for the soil? Is this healthy for our tribe? Is this healthy? Are we getting something from this? How do we incorporate this? So there was a really nice grounded matrix that then had added in new technological ideas and advancement as the tribe continued. So it's a methodical process of trial and error, and something that has been a little bit challenging for me that I'm still kind of working on, maybe at the PhD level, is getting into how do we explain the multidimensional, the multi-reality ways of incorporating, seeing nature. All of nature is listening, has spirits, is aware. How do we give proper thankfulness? How are we in right livelihood and harmony? And a little bit later on, I'll talk about how Western dominant science is actually coming to some of the same conclusions that at least Lenape and other indigenous cultures have been talking about for thousands of years. And or they're actively going to indigenous cultures and asking, hey, this isn't working for fire management of our trees. What do you recommend? What has worked in the past? So this is already kind of beginning to happen, looking back at indigenous cultures to understand how to help have better stewardship of the earth and communities. But I'll pull back away from that to just keep focused for a moment here on what the Lenape were involved with. So they evolved with what worked, did not work, logic-based, also trying to find emotion, logic, and finding a wise mind way of going about things. So there were traditional hunting and fishing, gathering, gardening came in a little bit later. And let's see if I can go into the next slide. So what Dr. Kraft also brought up, for few exceptions, he can demonstrate that life was peaceful. Homes and gardens were not fortified. Men could be fierce warriors if need be, but weren't usually called upon to do so. There were annual deer drives, meaning working with other tribes in the area to collectively gather and meet before the winter. Cooperative measures were utilized, and serious matters were discussed and decided as a mutual tribe. So elders had wisdom and experience and were followed, but they didn't have any control or authority. It was very much, there was definitely a structure of working together and I know that just as an aside, there's a lot of talk, well, there's no I, there's no, everyone we're all working. And that's true. There's a real strong working together, but the individual's journey and soul, and whether it's a vision quest, walkabout, what they uncover on their own was taken extremely seriously as the protocol and systems were set up to make sure they were getting a sure shot and working directly with unfettered access to what they knew as source or their soul or Kishlemunpong, great creator spirit. And that information was brought back sacrosanct, and that would often be discussed and maybe push the needle forward as far as another way to work with the environment or something that could help the tribe. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions? I know Michelle Gilbert was going to be, hopefully, if anyone has any questions, please let her know. If you can type into the chat, I will definitely answer them. But if not, I will continue on. So land and resources, big thing on Earth, right? Between different nations and between different groups of people. Well, for the Lenape, you could not, no one could own the land, as this land was given by the creator for all. But there were use rights, and they were recognized and respected, whether within the tribe or without the tribe. Men and women were treated equally, and men and women had different specific jobs to perform that were honored. And to be fair, that if, for example, a female went on a vision quest and came back and really was like, I really need to be a hunter, or I'm not needing to have a family, I want to be focusing on this, that was also respected. So it was a fluid, vibrant, I guess, live document that that was growing and changing just as the earth and nature was growing and changing, which it did. And I think that's something that I highlight is the resiliency needed, because the earth was either neutral, or it was cooling, or it was warming up. So there are times in such a long history where they had to be adaptive and know how to be adaptive, both as a structure, as a society, as well as how to make sure shelter, clothing, food, and water were happening. One of the reasons why I believe, from what Dr. Kraft's works was showing, they stopped being nomadic and sort of had sort of a more settled with the longhouses and different structures to live in later on. Storytelling was very important, and recreation, as this was strength, endurance, imparting knowledge, unity, social and ceremonies, and clothing and tools all had meaning. And they were constructed carefully, and they were interwoven with rituals and value systems that worked for the Lenape and their way of life. So as I can sort of see here, I won't get too into it, but usually an individual's livelihood or why they were here was marked pretty early on. I know for me, in my background, it was about at 3 years old. I was kind of known to be a healer and was begun the training then. And then my formal training began when I was 19 years old. And inside of the healing methodology in the Lenape, I am a shaman in that I work multidimensionally, but I have friends, colleagues, and families that are more herbalists, or they're bone setters. Maybe they're a surgeon, but then they're also doing traditional bone setting and combining the two. From colleagues at the NIH, walking that line between working how you work on Navajo land and how you work on a study at the NIH, and learning how they can work or they're separate, is definitely an interesting journey in 2022. But most Lenape people all had some awareness, a very close connection to nature, better protection, better unity, and this kept moving forward. And I'm gonna, because I've already researched some of this information in one of my books, just gonna peek my head in over here. So even if we look at some of these pictures and we say, this doesn't resonate with me, I don't get this, this looks weird. We can at least say everything had to be respected and cherished, everything. So you see a duck struggling, you see an eagle that's broken its wing. This isn't something that can just be pushed aside. Everything had to be respected and cherished. And as a result, every Lenape Indian endeavored to live in harmony with the environment, its plants and animals. So no important journey was undertaken, no special project was begun without consulting the supernatural spirits, which were believed to be that energy, that life force, that awareness, that consciousness was in all matter, that from rocks to dirt to minerals to four-legged, two-legged, winged creatures, the whole thing. So I think that what is interesting is, well, I get ahead of myself, but when we look at it from a neuroscience point of view, what neuroscientists are now finding is how valuable this is to the human brain and valuable to a human society when there is a settledness and an appreciation and a gratitude, not only within and around oneself, how that sort of changes things. And so the Lenape came along this on their, in their own way. And it sort of dictated everything. So I know that we talk about Western dominant culture, there being often a separation of religion and other workings, and there wasn't that separation for Lenape Indians, nor is there for many Native tribes, even to this day, that from my own personal opinion, that are the healthiest. They're really interweaving the traditions and the culture and the way of right livelihood with nature, which, that's a whole nother topic. So I won't go too much in there, but as we can see here are some traditions of how for curing, working with nature, also how to bury the deceased as well. Again, if any questions, let me know, please. All right. So now we come to the part, I wanted to just make sure I'm not missing anything, and I apologize, they're doing some mowing. So the white settlers came along, and I have the date here as 1600 AD. They were formally Lenape forced to move in 1758. So from 1600 AD to 1758 AD, the Lenape were willingly shared their lands. However, the European settlers followed a way of life and systems that were very different from the Lenape. The Europeans could find little reason for friendship or common understanding with the Indians, and European settlers just had a very different attitude toward natural resources and their use. They believed that land could be owned outright and that human nature had to be tamed and improved by human effort. And what the white man could not get by purchase or treaty was soon obtained by trickery, murder, biological warfare in the form of contagious diseases implanted, such as in blankets given, and wars that ended up resulting from the fur trade. So many innocent Indians were killed because of simple misunderstandings, lack of communication, and racist attitudes. In little more than a century, following the European colonizations, the Indians were pushed out of Lenapehoking. And we can see here one of the treaties signed here on 1682 with William Penn. So it's just two very different, all human beings, same species, 10,000 years, the human brain, human anatomy has not changed for most of humanity, or all of humanity. And this coming just not, not able to find common ground. And I go ahead and I'll go to the next slide. And again, I'll pause here. If anyone has any questions or wants to mention anything, please let me know. Just jump in. So personally, here's a picture from, I believe it's 2009 from National Geographic's cover. And the picture on the one side, 1609, and then of course, New York City in 2009. And here's a better image of that. And I kind of have to wonder, I looked at the quality of life, the contentment, love in self and community, sense of purpose and harmony, education, medicine, generational inclusion, and so safe in one system to be kind to foreigners that look completely different. The Lenape way of being for 10,000 years and the care of the land, air, waters, and other species. And I compare this to what has happened to the same land, differing humans with their social governing structure from 1758 to 2022 AD. And I find it shocking in how short amount of time, less than 300 years, the pollution of all of nature, the much suffering of humans on multiple levels, physical, emotional, mental, energetic, the chaos and many systems not in alignment with the human as a biological animal or the living earth. And many Native people back in that time frame could see this was coming, but thought it would take many generations to get to the level of destruction we see happening now. And it's not saying one system is better than the other, it's what is the objective. So if, it really depends on what a culture's society's objective is, and that will determine what then occurs. I know I've been trained to be very neutral and non-agenda in my approach to healthcare and working individually with patients. And I believe that as well as a greater, larger encompassment as well of communities, that I'm not here to judge it. I'm here to just point out what is the objective and are we meeting that objective? And if we're not meeting that objective, what might need to change? So I will go on to the next slide unless I missed something. All right. So here we come to, oh, yes. So here we come to, I'll move myself out of the way so you can see this. Okay. So in regard to human care, modern science, scholarly work is looking at global earth-based Indigenous ways, whether this is looking directly at Indigenous practice or modern sciences are coming to it organically, learning and practicing what is happening. So if we look at, for example, the neuroscience of gratitude and optimism, gratitude and mindfulness, but especially gratitude has been shown neurologically to really change the landscape of the brain, as well as multiple health systems, whether it's hormone levels or whether it's better dopamine, it goes on, and I won't go on to it. But I think of some of the big house ceremonies and the longhouse of gratitude, of working with, as we see in dialectical behavioral therapy work, the light and the dark, finding the balance and the harmony between the two. And so I personally find it exciting to see how, for example, in CBT DBT work, Dr. Marsha Linehan is looking at how do we deal with distress tolerance, emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, mindfulness skills. How do we find this balance between logic-driven and high super emotions? How do we find that wise mind inside? And that's something that all the practices that Lenape had going on in their lives was constantly coming back to, because they observed that it worked well in nature. And since we ultimately are animals, just another animal on this planet, it would make sense that what works for other animals will most likely work for us as well. Just another snapshot here, the academic and media interest in mindfulness has soared in recent years as well. I'm not sure how Dr. Emoto came across his studies in water consciousness. This is a researcher out of Japan. Some people might have heard of him, but he proved with his pioneer in the study of water, his work demonstrated that water is shaped by the environment, thoughts, and emotions. And so when we see a Lenape Indian or another Indigenous person working with the water in whatever way that culturally means for them, they're actually creating a structural change to that water and how it operates. And so Dr. Emoto started with that work, and other researchers have taken off with that. It's the same inside of vibrational medicine as well, that Lenape Indians and others have talked about inside of multidimensional or multivibrational work. NASA is also doing some really interesting work with the energy bodies around the human field. So it's definitely already happening. And this is one of my colleagues, Dr. Luis Malmadrona, who is a doctor, a psychiatrist, and really specializes, he's Cherokee and specializes in the power of stories. And my work in Boston, I actually ended up talking and working with him a bit, in that I was finding in my own ways of working, and that I had learned how to get inside of cells and to hear and to talk with the story. And once we could work with that story, even if the person was in a coma or unconscious, I could shift how the cells were reacting in the body or to the pharmacology, the medicines that were in there working with the cancer. So physics talks about it and Lenape Indians talk about it. It's finding, again, the math to kind of bring it together. But there's a lot of great researchers on both sides of the equation now, both from an Indigenous point of view and a Western dominant, and some doing both. Here you go. All right. So in regard to climate, the earth and climate change and pressing disease questions, modern science and scholars are looking to Indigenous cultures for help. So I just put up 2 articles that I had found: Once Ignored Indigenous Knowledge of Nature Now Shaping Science, and the World Health Organization Supports Scientifically Proven Traditional Medicine. So again, I remember, not to go all into it, but interfacing with the CEO of a company, a pharmaceutical company that was researching traditional medicine out of China and they were working specifically with cancer and trying to figure out where in their labs they were missing something. They were missing a link or missing something. So I think it's important to understand how many of our systems currently that we utilize have come from an Indigenous culture or Native culture, such as the structuring of our Constitution to some degree out of the Iroquois Constitution, or land management of fires, understanding what Native nations have done out west to help with that situation. So the list goes on, but I will continue. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Yes, my topic. The case for space. So this was a little shocking, I'll be honest, because I'm in space studies and studying astronomy. And Robert Zubrin is one of the top engineers out of Lockheed Martin and is a well entrenched and known throughout the space industry and community. And I know as I was putting this together, I think talking with a little bit with Dr. Walks, like, what's the space? Maybe wait another time. I was like, no, space. It's really important for what is being said and what we are doing, because right now, as many of you might already know or not know, a lot of our low Earth orbit, or LEO, is filled with satellites that we use for GPS, or we use in our iPhones, or we use for our TV, or we use at the ATM machines, or we use in medical hospitals, or we use in our armed forces. So these satellites are absolutely now become really, we understand about weather and tracking weather and taking, where a fire is moving or climate. So low Earth orbit has become, it is obviously a very important part of the Earth and how we care for the Earth and care for ourselves. And the case for space and continuing moving forward is something that Native people, Indigenous people have been doing for thousands of years, venturing into new lands, trying out new things, absolutely. And it can be done with 2 different ways. One, which is there's a need and we're collaboratively working as a group, and we have measures and markers to show us that we're on track here, or maybe this isn't so good for us. It's part of our resiliency as a human species. And then there's another track. We look at Christopher Columbus in 1492, which we are looking at money, we are looking at power, we are looking at manifest destiny, and we are looking at capitalism. And capitalism doesn't have to be, I'm not advocating this is negative, but what I am saying is that when we have gone on the 1492 track and decimating Indigenous cultures, wisdom, and ways, and also mining and fracking the earth relentlessly, bringing in chemicals we don't fully know what they're going to do, things of that nature, has really come back to haunt us. And I think climate scientists would probably agree with most of what I am saying here. So I think sometimes there's this discussion of, well, Native, that's old, doesn't really apply to the modern times. And no, we've been going forward into frontiers, and here I am, excited about space like others. But what Robert Zubrin and other scientists are proposing is, multiple times through his book, he highlights the importance and the amazement of what Christopher Columbus did, and that they came to North America where there was nothing here. And he goes on and on how, he celebrates the slave trade, and he demonstrates how the slave trade can be used as far as into the greater cosmos. And I don't get the sense that he is focused in on the harm this has caused multiple people or the harm to the earth, but there seems to be a disconnect from actually seeing, are we learning from our past? Because he's advocating, and again, I really like this book, incredible engineering ideas, really interesting. But if we're thinking about, for example, I talked about low Earth orbit LEO, we have all these satellites and they're really important. We have so much space junk falling out of the sky, hitting and destroying other satellites, and practically, harming the International Space Station, because a whizzing little piece of, just a little piece that's broken off is now like fast as a speeding bullet and will lodge into something and knock it out. So not only do we have garbage on Earth we don't know what to do with, we have cumulative amount of space junk we don't have yet. We're working on it, but don't have yet how to deal with it. That is really going to complicate and cause issues. Not only that, if we're sending up multiple rockets and we don't have a way to deal with the gases that are being leaked out, we now have an environmental issue of suffocating our atmosphere potentially if you have thousands of rockets going up. Not even to include that Zubrin is really advocating for completely mining asteroids and completely mining all the water out of the moon and going on from there. And I think, and I won't get in too much into it, but if we look at the James Webb Telescope and any images, we are very aware that there's very little we know of the universe, or the delicate balance of how things are constructed, how stars explode, how they bring different elements out to different planets. And this delicate balance, like the delicate balance we have on Earth, we are on track to do what we did to the Earth in 1492 to 2022 AD. We are on track to do the exact same thing in space. So I don't know if I'm a canary in the coal mine here, but I don't think, I don't know if space will ultimately stop us, but I don't see this being a sustainable model. And if we're looking for sustainable models, I think on Earth, as well as in space, sustainable models can be achieved. And there's definitely documentation of tribes taking steps forward and doing something, making a mistake, and then going back again. I think there's a lot of potential. It's a very fertile time, but we do need to, my advocate is for, a world space organization like the World Health Organization, the UN, and talking with historians, talking with researchers, or understanding our past history, because repeating what we are doing now in space, we're actively doing it right now as we're junkifying our low Earth orbit, with potentially disastrous results if we don't get it under control some point somewhat soon. So not to end on a lower topic. So my hope for the future is to rely on learning from older cultures that have dealt with changes to the Earth. These Indigenous cultures have a proven long history of understanding, resiliency, and expertise in how they manage themselves and their environment. Integrity, value, the ability to safely weave in technology, and the ability to evolve into a highly organized structure and system while following the Earth and species of, has always been with humans, discovered and replicated in many older Indigenous cultures throughout time. And these are solid and good systems to learn from, to deal with some of our modern pressing concerns and questions. So I think that is about it. And then my references. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Happy to share. I'll take a peek.
All right, doesn't look like we have any questions. We can hang around in the chat. If anyone has any questions, Bridget is here to answer them.
And I'm also happy, if people review it or they have questions after something comes to mind, I'm always available through email. Feel free to reach out. These are topics that I'm very interested in, learning with others and researching myself.
Awesome. Would you mind posting your email in the chat box? So then that way, if anyone wants to reach out, they directly have that.
Yep. Let me just see. Okay. See if that worked. Does that work? Yeah. Okay.
Yep,
Did that work?
perfect.
Okay.
All right, well, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Bridget, for that wonderful presentation. Just a reminder, it was recorded, so we can get that link sent out to you or your organizations. And then, of course, if you have some questions that come up later for Bridget, definitely reach out to her via her email there in the chat. And thank you to Sergo for hosting, and we will let you all have the rest of your Tuesday back. And have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.